welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about The Last Showgirl, shot here in Las Vegas by Gia Coppola, starring Pamela Anderson in a role that's getting all kinds of acclaim, awards nominations, and honestly, very deservedly so. Loved this movie, and we had a great time watching it at the Beverly. Thank you to the Beverly for inviting me out with a live Q&A with Pamela Anderson and Robert Schwartzman. It was a great time over there. And today we are talking to Robert Kachelriess from the CityCast Las Vegas, and we have a great conversation, get into a lot of great puzzle pieces, some Vegas ones and some other puzzle pieces as well. But yeah, that's coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod to find out about everything that's going on in Piecing It Together world, including we just did a live show at the time of recording. It'll be tomorrow, but it's at the time this goes up, it'll have been yesterday, a live show on Den of Thieves 2 Pantera at Maya Cinemas, but I should be announcing today a live show at Downtown Cinemas next week, so keep an eye out. Lots of live shows on the way. But yeah, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. And with that said, let's talk about The Last Showgirl. All right, it's time to talk about The Last Showgirl, and joining me, we've got Robert Kachelriess. How's it going, Rob?
It's going good, man. How are you?
I am great. It is, it's a new year. I haven't covered any technically 2025 movies yet, but this movie is just finally like making it to wide release. We both got to see it at the Beverly at a really awesome screening with Pamela Anderson and Robert Schwartzman in attendance, which was great. But there's still these movies that are kind of hangers on that we still got to talk about because they're great movies and we don't want to let them slide by. So
Yeah, especially when they showcase Las Vegas so well.
yes, exactly. I can't let a movie that showcases our city in, I think, a pretty good light. And I can't let that pass by. So we'll get into a lot of that in a minute. Before we get to it, though, it is your first time on the show. Tell my listeners a little about you and what you do.
Sure. So I've been in the Las Vegas media landscape since about 2012. I've been in broadcast news. I've been a freelance writer. I've done a lot of different things, local magazines. For about the last year, I've been the editor of Hey Las Vegas, which is the newsletter and website for CityCast Las Vegas.
Hmm.
And the podcast, hosted by David Figler, who I know you've had on the show in the
Yep.
past,
Yep.
and also Sarah Lohman. And the idea is to give Las Vegas a daily newsletter and a daily podcast Monday through Friday. We're off for holidays, of course, but it's very it's not strictly for locals, but it's geared towards locals to keep people in touch with the communities they love, as we like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So
we all
subscribe, sign up.
definitely subscribe, and we all appreciate you guys doing what you're doing, and
Mhm.
shining a light on some things that locals are doing. It's hard to get the word out when we're doing things, and so thank you for all the calendar updates when you put me in there in my live shows. But
We're absolutely happy to do so. And we really do support local art, local creators. And
yeah,
again, sign up. Just Google CityCast Las Vegas. It'll come right up. And it's free in your inbox at 6 a.m. every morning.
right on. So getting to The Last Showgirl, I think like when you went into this screening, like what was your kind of impressions of what this movie was going to be, kind of going into it?
I knew there was strong buzz about it. I'm one of those guys who likes to go into a movie or TV show knowing as little about it as
Sure.
possible.
Yeah.
And funny enough, The Last Showgirl was the only movie I've seen in the theater in 2024,
Oh wow.
which makes
Okay.
me a perfect guest on a podcast about movies. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've always loved kind of art house dramas.
Mhm.
And so I knew this was getting some good buzz, for lack of a better word, advanced buzz, good previews. I know she was nominated for the Golden Globe in
Mhm.
advance. And, I'm just a sucker for Vegas stories, visuals, TV shows, movies, even
Yeah.
bad ones
Yeah.
sometimes.
Sure. Sure.
So, I was looking forward to it, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was a great film. I thought it was a great cast with solid, strong performances all around. And I think, funny enough, for a movie that's kind of about the struggles of aging, I think this movie is going to age very well. I think it'll be
Mm,
one of those things that, it's not the flashiest movie in the world, but when people see it come on their streaming service or TV channel, they'll just kind of sit and watch it, appreciate it, and look back on it fondly in the years to
yeah.
come.
I agree. And, it's funny sometimes when I'm putting together my puzzle pieces list, some of the movies that I end up bringing up, I love as much as the movie I'm covering. And some of them are like, well, that movie kind of sucks, but like it does have a good theme here that we could kind of connect. I think all the movies that I'm going to talk about today are movies that are great. And I think this fits in with all of those movies really well. But
Not all
yeah,
of mine are necessarily
okay.
great, but we'll get to that.
Fair, fair.
Mhm.
Yeah, but yeah, I think the main buzz out of this is Pamela Anderson, having this big kind of performance that she hasn't really gotten a chance to do. And I think she absolutely delivers. And just this morning, she also picked up the SAG Award nomination, and we'll see how, all that continues. But
And you've just given away what day we're recording.
yeah, that's true. Absolutely. They all know now, so they
Mm.
can track our Riverside recording. Now they know Riverside is the app. Um,
Inside baseball.
yeah, there you go. Let's get into some puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first one?
All right. So I don't know if this could be a little too obvious or not, but my first movie is Casino,
Okay.
Martin Scorsese's classic about crime, about gambling, about casino life, about Las Vegas.
Hmm.
It's kind of everybody's favorite movie about Vegas. I'm just going to
Sure.
assume that.
Yeah.
That's not the only reason I picked it, but I'm just kind of a sucker, like I said, for classic Vegas imagery. Just getting into the grit of what our beautiful city is all about, kind of what makes it tick.
Hmm.
And much in the same way in Casino, crime and casinos and gambling and the mob made it tick.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
The Last Showgirls, you got the entertainment side, which makes this city tick. And much like the mob isn't quite as present, at least not in its traditional form in the city anymore. We don't really have the classic showgirl in Las
Right.
Vegas anymore. When you think about showgirls in Las Vegas now, it's people who are trying to hit you up for a photo in front of the Bellagio or on Fremont Street.
Spider-Man,
Um,
or
yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
The Last Girl was very much inspired by Jubilee. That's
yeah.
no secret. And not to go off on a tangent, but one of the stars of the movie are the costumes,
Oh
which
yeah.
were on loan from Caesars Entertainment. They were actual Jubilee costumes, which is like a very real part of Las Vegas in this movie, in addition to the actual shooting locations. But I want to kind of single out Casino because they did shoot on location in Las Vegas. They did have some moments of places that were real locations, but renamed.
Hmm.
I believe, like Main Street Station isn't quite Main Street Station in,
Sure.
the movie, and a few other moments, the actual casino. But sometimes
Yeah.
Vegas lends itself to imagery where you're kind of making up a new name for it, but you still kind of recognize it and it still fits what you're talking about.
Sure.
So, am I on track here? What do you think, David?
I think absolutely it belongs on the list here. And I think as far as Las Vegas movies that are authentic, is something Josh Bell, film critic, is a regular guest on the show. And he talks about it a lot, about how a lot of times when Vegas is depicted, they just kind of mix and match our city and however they want it to be. Like the Grand Canyon is right at the south end of
Right.
Las Vegas Boulevard or whatever. But yeah, Casino like does it right, and I think The Last Showgirl does it right. And kind of like to the Q&A that we both got a chance to see, they talked about how they managed to like finish some of their days really early and then just go out and shoot some extra B-roll with Pamela Anderson. And a lot of that I think really adds to the authenticity, because as people who live here, we know like it's not all just the strip. And so when she's like out just kind of walking around, we're seeing like downtown, we're seeing like all of these kind of areas. I thought I might have seen industrial at one point, but like seeing like those kind of areas, and it all kind of adds to the tapestry of what Las Vegas really is.
Yeah, it's that beautiful grit of Las Vegas. And I want to make one more connection to Casino because kind of the big industry story at the time, because I think Casino is one of those movies that didn't quite get its due when it was out, and people look back on it now and they rate it higher, and it's looked at as more of a classic now, where I think
Hmm.
back then people saw it as like um, Goodfellas, but not quite, maybe.
Sure.
But the big industry story at the time was Sharon Stone's performance in
Right.
that
Right.
movie, and she got nominated for an Academy Award, and it kind of was her journey from going from someone who was known as, the eye candy of a
Sure.
movie. I mean, she was very talented in movies like Basic Instinct, but
Mhm.
also it's very much, a sexual icon
Yeah, yeah.
moment. And she kind of went legit, so to speak, with Casino, showing she really did have the chops, that she was award worthy. And we're seeing that with Pam Anderson in The Last Showgirl. She's going from this, you know, person known for her looks, and that's what she made her money on, but also showing she has chops and is getting recognized for it a
Yeah.
few years down the line. So I
Absolutely.
saw some similarities there, so to
Yeah.
speak.
I think that's absolutely another way that these two can connect. Definitely. I will jump right to my main Vegas puzzle piece here, and that is Leaving Las Vegas. I think
Yes,
Casino would be at home on anybody's favorite, Las Vegas movies list. Leaving Las Vegas might be my favorite. I'm a, of course, who isn't a Nicolas Cage fan, but he's just the best, and Elizabeth Shue is fantastic in it too. But
definitely.
showing that kind of side of Las Vegas, of like what it can do to people's psyches and to their, their kind of trajectory of their own life and how it could kind of suck them in and just never let go of who they are, which is, certainly a negative side of things, but, it is something that can very well happen. And I think you can kind of look at what Vegas has done to these two people and then look at what it's done to Pamela Anderson Shelley, and you can kind of see connections there, even if it's not quite as dark as Leaving Las Vegas. I think you could definitely see connections. And then more than anything, even more than themes or story wise or any of that, cinematography wise, I feel like Gia Coppola and her cinematographer took like real pains to make Vegas look a specific way, which really
Yes.
kind of captures uh, kind of a melancholy, but at the same time, you're getting all the glitz and glam too, and it's just kind of mixing them together really well. And I think Leaving Las Vegas did that like just beautifully, and I think Last Showgirl does as well.
Yeah, it's like you're not ignoring the obvious tourist locations, but also you're not showing them in the same, way that other movies or TV shows do. Like, oh, here's the helicopter shot of the strip, and
Yeah, yeah,
here's, the tourists going in and out of the casinos. There's a lot of moments where they, just kind of, they let these backgrounds kind of speak for themselves without too much interference. And
sure.
when I think about Leaving Las Vegas, which I think I saw again recently, like a year or two ago, it was streaming on something.
Hmm.
But Nicolas Cage goes to Las Vegas to drink himself to death.
Yeah,
Um, Pam Anderson Shelley came to Vegas to be a star, to be on a show. I mean, it's if you're moving to Vegas, you really kind of have a distinct purpose in life,
yeah,
good for better or worse.
yeah, yeah.
It's
You
not
got,
just, "Oh, I happen to
yeah.
be here."
Missions. You got to have
Yeah.
a mission when you come to Vegas for sure. Let's go to another piece. What do you got next?
Okay, actually, I'm going to, since we've already referenced this already, I'm gonna do a little bit of an oddball, choice. I'm gonna go with a music video.
Oh, okay,
So, a
sure.
few months ago, Coldplay released a video for a song called "All My Love." And it was a viral video in a couple different ways. Chris Martin, the singer, dressed in disguise. It was kind of a goofy disguise, and carried some red balloons around Fremont Street and other parts of downtown, just kind of handing out these balloons to random people. How
Hmm.
much of this was staged and how much wasn't, I'm not entirely sure, but it has a very authentic tone to it. And this video went viral because at the end of the video, he goes into Dino's, everybody's
Dino's,
favorite
yeah.
karaoke bar, including
Hmm.
David Figler from CityCast Las Vegas, who happened to be there that night, who loves karaoke,
I've
and
been there
actually
plenty of times.
recorded Chris Martin going on stage in disguise and singing the song before everybody kind of figured it out who it
Hmm.
was. Singer from Coldplay. Um, so it's and why this reminds me of The Last Showgirl are those kind of segs you were talking about earlier, where Coppola and Pam Anderson would just go and kind of film these little moments that were kind of in between scenes,
Yeah,
often at dusk too. So you kind of
sure.
had some of this almost golden hour lighting or dusk lighting moments in front of like the Luxor, but not
Hmm.
making the Luxor look touristy, almost just like this kind of leftover building that could be anywhere.
Sure.
There's even a moment where they're filming it in front of ruins, so to speak, which what turned out to be the Tropicana
Okay.
before it was cleared away. Actually, before it was imploded, but they had destroyed much of it on the ground level.
Mhm.
Um, so those scenes reminded me of that because the music video, I think, was shot with like an Apple phone.
Sure.
So it was handheld, very raw, but again, that beautiful grit of Las Vegas where you're not ignoring all these landmarks and things that people know and the neon, but still kind of getting a different tone and a different look for it. And when Vegas is dirty, when it's gritty, it's still beautiful. Sometimes it's even more beautiful.
Mhm.
And that's why it kind of stood out to me. And to be fair, um, the movie was shot before this video was shot and released, so it's not like the
Yeah.
movie could have been inspired by this, but I do
Yeah.
see similarities.
Yeah, similarities in the approach of capturing Las Vegas. So
Mhm.
absolutely, like about 10 years ago ish, one of my music videos for one of my instrumental tracks, "If Only Tonight I Could Sleep," was shot downtown, and some of the shots in this movie reminded me so much of the way I think it was by the Golden Gate,
Mhm.
possibly downtown, and like those overhanging lights and all that, and the way she's walking under them.
Yeah.
The shots seemed like their cinematographer and my cinematographer both just had the exact same idea of how to shoot this moment, and
Yeah.
like I was like, yeah, this is how you shoot Vegas.
Yeah, it's
So
almost like
yeah,
guerrilla filmmaking, just have
yeah,
the camera and go, and there's always something cool to point a camera lens at in Vegas.
absolutely. Well, I will go to the first one I thought of actually for this movie when I first saw the trailer, and I think it absolutely fits really well, and that is Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler. Um,
Ah.
you could also go Black Swan a little bit because,
Mhm.
obviously a performer, female story, but The Wrestler I think is the better analog here with Mickey Rourke as a wrestler who is kind of getting to this crossroads in his life where he's being told like you can't do the thing that you have made your entire identity anymore. And at this point, the doctor has told him he's gonna die if he continues doing it. It's of course a little different in The Last Showgirl. It's just simply shutting down, and at her age, she's probably not going to be able to get another lifelong role like she's had for these last 30 years. But
And
similar
coming to
though,
grips with getting to be an
exactly.
aging entertainer.
Exactly. That
Mhm.
aging and the feeling of like this is all I know, this is all I do, this is my entire life. What am I going to do from this point forward? I think you get two very similar setups for these two characters who are kind of in similar places at the time that we meet up with them. And of course, Mickey Rourke just fantastic, as well as Pamela Anderson is fantastic here.
Mhm. And, definitely actually, I did think about The Wrestler, and I considered that for one of my choices. And what's interesting about both movies is the developments on screen really happen backstage.
Hmm.
You see very little on stage in The Last Showgirl. You see very little, in the ring. I shouldn't say very little, but the story is what happens off stage, and in the
Sure.
world of wrestling, it's away from the ring. It's, seeing all the things you have to do as a wrestler, whether it's getting your hair dyed, going to the tanning bed,
Yeah.
getting dressed in, you know the big stars are getting dressed at Madison Square Garden backstage, in nice dressing rooms. The aging independent wrestlers on the indie scene are getting dressed at, VFW halls and high school gyms where you're all
Sure.
crowded together and you're putting on your boots and putting on your tights and, how much did you make and how you gonna
Yeah.
feed yourself when you go home that day?
Not
And,
quite as glamorous.
right, and how much time do you have left to do this when this is what you've known all your
Mm,
life? I think there's a lot of similarities in both movies.
absolutely. Let's go to another one from you.
Okay, I am gonna go with, Pam and Tommy, which
Okay.
is the Hulu drama series.
Mhm.
And, it's kind of interesting because, I don't know if younger people really understand how famous Pamela Anderson was in the '90s.
Right.
Like, you could really make a case that she was the most famous person in the world for a minute there. I mean, between Baywatch and just the Playboy shoot and all the, drama in her personal life with, Tommy Lee and others. And, what's interesting about this Hulu series, which I believe came out in 2022, kinda looks at, how somebody so famous could just have their, privacy invaded so, I don't know, effectively.
Mm.
The infamous, sex tape, Vegas Connection, the real one was shot on Lake Mead.
Oh,
which I
that's
didn't even
right.
realize
Yeah.
until recently. But Vegas is famous for a little bit of everything, aren't we?
Sure, sure.
But this miniseries, to be honest, I didn't watch all of it. I watched some of it, and it's one of those that kind of makes fun of its subject matter a little bit. There's a few different directors involved, but you know, it's billed as a drama. I think it's more of a comedy. It's very silly. The most famous thing about this miniseries was a scene where Tommy Lee is talking to his penis and having a
Yeah, sure.
conversation with his famous member.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and also, that's not the only prosthetics you see. You see topless scenes of Lily James as Pamela Anderson, who has this ginormous set of breasts
Sure.
and fully prosthetic, and they look very real. I mean, in the sense of what, enhanced breasts look like in
Yeah.
real life. And I felt like it's almost like, you're almost making fun of your subject matter a little bit. Pamela
Mhm.
Anderson, known for being kind of plasticky in appearance while
Mhm.
still very beautiful, but also very much of that, iconic sex symbol of the time. And I think her turn in The Last Showgirl is kind of um, a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Vengeance against this kind of
Okay.
classic portrayal of her. The stereotypical look of how she's been viewed um, throughout her career. So I wouldn't be surprised if she probably didn't like this miniseries very much, but it might have inspired her to do other things. I think if you recall during the Beverly Theater Q&A, she was talking about how she, was trying to go from Playboy to and Baywatch to reading, classic plays, by the greats and trying to figure out how she can go from one end of the industry to the other, and I'm sure these depictions, fueled it, and so I'm gonna go with Pam and Tommy. I might have gone with The Dirt, which
Right.
is the Netflix movie about Motley Crue and is based on and one of the chapters was kind of a famous Rolling Stone article as well, just talking about how they met, how turbulent their relationship was. But I believe the movie version of The Dirt does not include Pam Anderson at all. So I'm
Hmm.
going with Pam and Tommy.
Yeah, I think that that's the right one to go with there. And yeah, I think this movie could very well be like you said, like kind of a an answer to all of that, you know? And I it's one of those roles where you kind of think like if Gia Coppola couldn't get Pamela Anderson, like what does she do with this movie? Cuz like it wouldn't have the same substance to it without an actress that you can kind of pick up on all of those years of actual life history and how that kind of feeds into the role. And I just don't think it would have worked even if you had like an incredible other, actress that also looks like a showgirl. Like it
Yeah,
just
and I
wouldn't quite
actually
work.
read an interview with Gia Coppola recently who said she wanted Pam Anderson from the start and fought very hard to get her. And I think Pam Anderson's representation, whoever that was, kind of got back to her very quickly and was just like, no, thanks.
Mm,
Because imagine all the stuff Pam Anderson gets pitched. I mean, she probably gets the modern equivalent of, Cinemax movies pitched or
sure.
things that maybe make fun of her past and that kind of stuff. So I believe what happened was Gia Coppola went through, she had a connection to one of Anderson's sons and kind of reached out this way and explained how his mother would be betrayed in this movie and kind of ended up making it happen. And as it turned out, Pamela Anderson was really looking for a movie like this for a long time. So they
Mm,
both came together. And as you know, this movie has a cast of people that you could say are all kind of going through a similar redemption arc in their careers. I mean, you have Dave Bautista, who's
hmm.
known for being a pro wrestler and a superhero character
Sure.
who gives a very understated performance in The Last Showgirl.
Definitely.
You got Brenda Song, known for being a child actor. Kiernan Shipka, who I know from Mad Men when she
Mm,
was a very young girl, now growing up playing a showgirl. It's a little bit of a head twist for me.
yeah.
But I think that's a kind of a common theme in a lot of this cast in The Last Showgirl, kind of moving on from what they've been known for and giving them a different kind of spotlight.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm gonna go for my next piece. Kind of, you could go with any of Sean Baker's films, but I think Red Rocket is the best one to go with. Although of
Yeah.
course we do have this year's Honora, which was also a Vegas movie, and I think the Florida Project fits in this as well. But I definitely think Red Rocket is the closest analogy to use here, mainly because these people in his movies, they're so real and they're not bad people, but you could tell that most of their problems are brought on by themselves. And it really showcases these people that are on the fringes of society who they exist in their own little bubbles. And whether they're told that they are shutting themselves out from, any kind of positive growth in their life or anything like that, or not, maybe they're just kind of living in their bubbles and that's it. Either way, they're not taking any kind of good advice and they're just kind of spiraling. And that's something you see in a lot of his films. I feel like it's kind of a common theme he comes back to. Red Rocket and Rex Reed's character, especially, which is probably the most self-destructive. Too self-destructive for Pamela Anderson's character here. Definitely not on the same level. But I think that that same kind of thing of this character who, if they could step outside themselves and look at what they're doing, they would see like, oh, I really do need to make this change.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of the characters in The Last Showgirl, while it's a very easy movie to watch and there's a lot of enjoyment in watching this movie, I don't know if they're necessarily likable characters or not
Sure.
necessarily dislikable either. I don't know if these are people I'd be friends with in real life, maybe, I don't know. But, there's even one moment where the Pam Anderson character, Shelley, is having a moment and kinda shuts out, one of her younger, um, co-stars who needs some attention and
Sure.
someone to talk to, a mother figure when she needs it most, and she's just like, "Sorry, I can't do it right now." And, and these things kinda hit hard because, they're not easy, simple solutions where everybody makes the right decision in the end.
Yeah.
And the, plot of The Last Showgirl, not a lot happens. I mean, if you were to describe the plot, there's the basic core premise of there's this long-running show, it's been going for 30 years, Shelley's been a part of it, I think for that duration or most of
I
it.
think from the very beginning, yeah.
Yeah, and she's sort of like the signature face of this, and it's ending, and that's, kind of the basic plot line, but not a lot of twists and turns happen from there. It's really, a character portrait and a series of them, and you're just watching these people, interact with each other, and it's a captivating movie strictly based on that.
Yeah, 100%. Just a really great character study. And real quick, before we go to your next piece, just as a Vegas, journalist, to the point you were just talking about her being at the show from the beginning and being the face of it, that was a very specifically Las Vegas thing, to see that she was on that flyer that they have not changed in like 30 years or
Right.
however long. And that's something we see all the time with like the ads for the showgirls or even the strip clubs here in Las Vegas, and it's always those same faces we've been seeing
Right.
for
I
20, 30
mean, that
years.
truck has been going up and down the strip with girls to your room for
Yes.
what, like 20, 30 years now? Where
Yeah.
are those girls now?
Yeah, they're in
I
their
kinda want
60s
to
at
know. I
least.
don't want them
Yeah.
in my room, but I just
Yeah.
I wanna know that they're okay.
Yeah. Hopefully they're
Yeah.
doing all right. So, what do you got for one more piece?
Okay, like I said, when I was watching this movie, as I mentioned earlier, I do like my art house movies. I like my independent film, and I really like dialogue-driven movies when they're done well, when there's a strong script. And in some ways, The Last Showgirl reminded me of some of my favorite Woody Allen movies.
Hmm.
And I've always preferred the more serious movies by Woody Allen, kind of like Husbands and Wives, Crimes and Misdemeanors, at least the serious parts of that movie.
Hmm.
Just when you're seeing characters interact and with really well-written dialogue. And it made me think of Stardust Memories, which is gonna be
Hmm.
my final pick for this podcast, which is an interesting movie. I believe it came out in 1980, and it was very divisive at the time. It was kind of seen as Woody Allen playing a version of himself while kind of resenting those who expect things out of him, whether it's studio people, fans, even people like asking for help with like a charity cause.
Hmm.
So you can kind of see why maybe this character, while he's very funny in the movie, but it's also kind of his job to be funny, At the same time, he's maybe not so likable. And I think this is one of those movies that's kind of been appreciated more over the years. I've always liked it, but then again, I've been watching it kind of in the context of this in between other movies that I like Manhattan, like Hannah and Her Sisters, things like that. But it's very strong writing. It's very dialogue driven and
Mm,
a lot of unusual imagery. A lot of it inspired by Bergman and Fellini, Eight and a Half in particular. But I kind of wanted to pick a more serious Woody Allen movie, and I'm going with this one. And part of it is because, much in the same way Woody Allen is playing a version of himself in this movie, even playing a director, a movie director, Pam Anderson is. I don't know if I want to say she's playing a version of herself, but she's maybe playing an alternate timeline version of herself. I mean,
sure.
if she wasn't, successful in Hollywood and a Playboy icon, I could see her being a Las Vegas showgirl or somebody who found full-time work in this town. And I mean, she actually did it as a celebrity guest with the Hans Glock show. I want to say about 10, 15 years ago. And she did reference that during the question session at the Beverly Theater.
Mm,
But it's kind of like Stardust Memories was a little meta before meta was
sure.
cool. Before Larry David was playing a version of himself. Woody Allen was doing it too, and I sort of see a
Totally.
little bit of a through line between roles that people are really meant to play that reflect their real life versions of themselves.
Absolutely. I That's a great one, and I think of, like, if we had gotten to see, where she ends up after, the credits start rolling, like, we might be seeing some of that transformation into whatever the next stage is, if she's
Mhm.
able to pull herself together and figure out what that transition is. Another movie, like, it wasn't one that I was thinking of, but like it connects really well with Stardust Memories, the comic with Dick Van Dyke. We covered it on my other podcast, Awesome Movie Year, but also about someone who had this huge career in entertainment and has to kind of transition. He was a silent film comedian and has to transition into a new era of comedy. And so I think that goes really well with Stardust Memories as two movies that deal with that kind of meta ness of somebody who's known for comedy and has to kind of change into a different kind of angle of any of that stuff. So, but yeah, Stardust Memory is a great one to include here. That's awesome. I will go for my last one. When I was coming up with my list, I was trying to think because I have a few others that are kind of similar to The Wrestler, but they're all about men. And I was trying to think of one that's about a woman. And kind of, this might be a bit of a stretch, but it's the closest thing I could think of from a couple of years ago, Nyad, about the swimmer with Annette
Yes.
Bening.
Okay.
As far as this person who, is basically all odds are against her, that, she can't really do this anymore because of age. She needs to kind of just give it up. And I mean, it's an insane thing to ever expect for yourself anyway, to be able to swim a challenge like that. But, that she should kind of hang it up, and she doesn't need to prove herself or anything like that anymore. And then you get to Pamela Anderson Shelley here, who is, you know, she's so committed to this performance she's done for 30 years. She's so committed to this life, this job, this career, and the act that it entails. And she is just so single-minded on that and won't give it up until it, absolutely has to be taken from her. And so you could kind of see a lot of connection there with that. And, they both end very differently, obviously, because it's out of her hands with The Last Showgirl, but that same kind of drive and intensity that the characters bring, I think they both have similar stories.
Yeah, when I was talking about this movie to people after I saw it, I described it as a very a very Vegas movie with very distinct settings, but with universal themes that people can really relate to. Whether and I'm glad you picked something that's like a sports or
Mm,
an athletic movie as well at the end there, because I think athletes go through that.
sure.
Entertainers go through that, whether you're a showgirl who's known for her looks or a professional wrestler who has to do what they do. What happens when you reach that point of life where everything I've known for years, maybe decades, um, what happens when I can't do that anymore?
Yeah.
And I think that's something, people can relate to. And The Last Showgirl is kind of about, okay, what if I made a left in the road when I could have gone right? What if I stayed in my kid's life instead of choosing this instead?
Yeah.
What if I just chose a different career or lived somewhere else other than Las Vegas or wherever that I ended up? And that's why I love that The Last Showgirl isn't too crazy with zigzagging plot lines. It's just
Hmm.
like a moment, it's a situation, and you really get to see people, respond and act like real people in a way that's very captivating.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure if you have information on this or not. When I was watching the movie, I was sort of trying to figure out, like, what year this was set in,
Mm.
and I think it's almost intentionally vague because this movie could have been 10 years ago, it could be today, maybe even a little bit older. There's one scene where I believe Pamela Anderson's character is holding, like, a flip phone,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't know if that's because this movie is supposed to be, a few years into the past. I don't know if it's supposed to be when Jubilee was still around, or if that's just what a character like her would carry, because maybe she's not too consumed by,
Yeah.
the latest iPhone and that kind of thing.
I feel like she would have a flip phone. And
Right.
she also has her awesome little projector set up in her living room, which is really
Yes.
nice, by the way.
Yes, and that's also another thing, not to give too much of the movie away, but there's a part where she's getting ready for an audition, and I think we can always, relate to, like, the big job interview or the big goal where maybe, it's you put your heart into it, but maybe it just doesn't come. Maybe it just doesn't happen. Maybe it does,
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't. But I think it was so relatable. And somebody did tell me, and I don't know if this was just hearsay, that they thought the movie was set or had heard the movie was set in like 2016, maybe when Jubilee did end, to
Hmm.
have that parallel. I don't know if that's the case or not. But either way, I think it works as kind of like a timeless setting. And that's one of those things that's great about Vegas, is
Sure.
it kind of works in any year.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That is definitely a Vegas thing. So, yeah, I think we got a great list of movies here that we talked about. Any closing thoughts? Anything you wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
No, thank you very much for having me on. Our friends at the Beverly Theater are going to screen this movie, I think, a couple weeks after it's in wide release.
Hmm.
So, if you want to kind of support the local arts community, I mean, go see movies wherever you like. All movie houses need business, big and small. But I think the tone of this movie works especially well in a theater like the Beverly Theater. So,
Yeah,
maybe go check them out and show them that, first run, more or less, programming is something that we can see more of there and see movies that aren't just about Vegas, but maybe some more movies that have award season's buzz come in sooner rather than later.
sure, sure. Speaking
Yeah.
of that tone, by the way, I just randomly sat down. I got there a little early the day of the screening. I sat down, I was like about 4 rows back, and right around me, literally in front, behind, and to my sides, were all the dancers who were the backup, extras in the movie, and they were just screaming their heads off through the whole movie. That's the way to see this movie.
Yeah, I mean, we should have pointed that out. Like, there was a lot of Vegas influence. I think
Yeah.
Dita Von Teese was involved.
Hmm.
There was some, local dancers who were involved, and I believe some former showgirls actually kind of consulted with Pamela Anderson on this movie and kind of explained how do you wear the headdress right and not get tired wearing it and those kind of
Sure.
tricks. But it was very much a community Vegas feeling watching this because you'd see someone in the background, and you hear a little cheer from the corner of the theater,
Yeah.
and that's still a big community that's happening, whether it's burlesque or dance or another kind of art. And they did a really great job. We talked about all the imagery in Vegas, but most of this was filmed at the Rio, but you wouldn't necessarily know. Like, they took the Wow Theater and used the backstage areas there to film it while the show was on, uh, I think, hiatus or something.
I think so. Yeah.
But they did an amazing job using the terrace at the top of the Rio for these amazing background shots and also the casino shots. It kind of shows you how universal all this stuff is, even
Yeah.
when a property like the Reno is going through its renovations right now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I always ask my guests to recommend another movie they watched recently. Do you got something you could recommend to our listeners?
Let's see. What have I been watching recently? I mean, I've been watching Squid Game too. I'm a little obsessed with it.
That works.
Does
Yeah,
that
yeah.
work?
Yeah.
It was funny because the Pam and Tommy series, I believe, has 8 episodes,
Mhm.
and the new season of Squid Game only has 7. I'm like,
Oh,
give me a little bit more, give me a little bit more. But it's more like the third season is basically the second half of season 2, kind
mm,
of cut in half so they can stretch it out. But that's what I spent my holidays doing. I was kind of riveted. My wife was getting mad at me because I'm lying in bed with my phone at like 3 in the morning, going, "All right, one more episode. I got to
One
watch
more.
this."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that's my pick for 2025. If you haven't watched it yet, start from the beginning and watch it all.
There you go. There you go. Well, Rob, thank you so much for doing the show. Where can people find you and everything you're up to?
Again, you can find us at CityCast Las Vegas. The actual website is lasvegas.citycast.fm. That sounds a little clunky to remember. Don't worry about it. Just Google CityCast Las Vegas. It'll come up right away. And we work very hard to give you guys news coverage on a daily basis. The newsletter is very like digestible. It's an easy thing to show up in your inbox every morning. I kind of describe it as a newspaper for the modern age. Instead of showing up on your driveway, it shows up in your inbox every morning at 6 a.m. And we like to cover just a lot of different things that people find fascinating in Las Vegas and doing it in a different way that's a little more personable. And don't forget to subscribe to the CityCast Las Vegas podcast. David and Sarah do an amazing job with that, along with our production team, Sonia and Layla, and everyone else with us. And that is on pretty much anything. Whatever you're watching, piecing it together on, or listening to it on, you'll find CityCast Las Vegas as well, whether it's Spotify, Apple, and all your other favorite streaming systems.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, thank you so much for doing the show, and hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
Thank you. I'll have to watch another movie so I can come back.
Hi, this is Wax Trax Records here on 2909 South Decatur. We buy all your old 45s, your old albums, any type of music memorabilia. Also, we sell music memorabilia, albums, CDs, and a lot. Come on down to Wax Trax, 2909 South Decatur, or give me a call at 702-362-4300. Thank you very much.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about The Last Showgirl. Thank you so much to Rob Kachelriess for joining me on that one. And thank you to you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, make sure that you are subscribed. We got a lot of episodes on the way. You could also drop us a 5-star rating and review. It helps make sure that more people get to check out the show. And I should also say thanks to the Beverly for inviting me out to that screening with Pamela Anderson and Robert Schwartzman. Speaking of which, I have confirmation on 2 puzzle pieces, Leaving Las Vegas and The Wrestler, which I mentioned to Robert Schwartzman when I met him after the screening, and he was like, oh, 100%, those are big influences. So there we go. We got a couple of confirmations on puzzle pieces there for you. But yeah, make sure you're subscribed. You can also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod to find out about all the stuff that we are up to, all the live shows, all the new episodes, and whenever we're looking for new guests. I'm always looking for new guests. So follow me on social media at Piecing Pod. You could also join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. So with all that said, it's time to close this with a piece of music, and I mentioned it during the episode, but I do have a music video that was shot in downtown in a lot of the same locations that we see Pamela Anderson walking through in downtown Las Vegas, and so I figured I might as well close with that. It is a song called If Only Tonight I Could Sleep. It is from my first album, Echoes in the Dark, and the music video was made by filmmaker Doug Farah. And yeah, you can find the video on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/music by David Rosen. There's a link down below. But I'm going to play the song now, If Only Tonight I Could Sleep. Hope you enjoy it, and we will be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.